Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Live Ready, a guide to protecting yourself in an uncertain world. No other than Mr. Sam Rosenberg.
Thank you, Daniel. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Sam. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. I've been in the business of protecting people and teaching them how to protect themselves for the last 25 years or so. A little bit more, actually. I got out of the Marine Corps in 1996. I was a Marine officer and ended up leaving the Marines and sort of landing in the close protection world. Fancy pants way of saying bodyguarding. Ended up protecting a variety of celebrities, dignitaries, high net worth individuals, people like Benjamin Netanyahu when he was the former prime minister of Israel, Warren Buffett, Tom Cruise, just to name a few. And but in 2003, I had a little philosophical shift that to me, it's good to have a lifeguard, but ultimately you should know how to swim.
Oh,
So
yes.
I switched my gears and I decided to start teaching people how to protect themselves with the same skills and tools that we use to protect public figures. And I dedicated my life really over the last, 20, 21 years or whatever it is, 22 years at this point, to developing a system for that. And I codified that system a couple years ago with Live Ready. This book here is designed to be basically the handbook, and when we think about self defense in many ways, most people immediately go to the physical elements. Do you do jujitsu? Do you do martial arts? Do the physical components of self defense and personal protection? But the reality is that it's better not to get into the trouble to begin with. And being able to recognize danger and recognize potentially dangerous people or dangerous personalities is a big aspect of that. Then how do you navigate it? And how do you navigate those everyday situations that we come into that are challenging? Whether it's someone who does not intend the right things for us or our best interests, how do we extricate ourselves from those things and avoid them? This book is really designed to give all of those soft skills that we rely on: how to think, how to operate in the world, and be able to navigate the complexities of human interactions where people may not have your best intentions at heart. So it's a very unique look and a very interesting dive into this idea. And I'm happy to get into it in more detail.
Mr. Sam Rosenberg, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. What is the target audience of Live Ready?
So I think there's really two target audiences. When it comes to men, if we just look at it from the standpoint of what do men and women get out of this, my male audience has a tendency to be, generally speaking, people who have a protector mindset. So these are people who are generally wired around understanding that their role in their family, for example, is to be able to provide and protect for their family, and they want to be able to do that on a higher level. They want to understand the techniques and the processes that allow them to develop those internal skill sets to be able to navigate things in a much broader way. With women, it tends to be more so to enable them to be able to really understand how to recognize dangerous people and to live in a much more confident way. So, I think that both groups of people, whether it's men or women, are going to get slightly different things from the book. But the concept is the skill sets are universal and they're timeless skill sets. In many ways, Daniel, and I talk about this in the very beginning of my book. One of the most intriguing things that I experienced in my career was, I worked with a lot of high profile, high net worth people that ostensibly from the outside in have conquered every aspect of life. They have all of the financial security that they need. They live in good neighborhoods. They travel first class. They do not really put themselves in a harm's way, but I found them coming to me for training, and in some cases coming to me for training and consulting services. And when I asked them, why do you do this training? You are well protected in most aspects. It always came back to the same idea that I'm going to summarize in my own way, is this idea that Abraham Maslow, postulated decades ago, the idea of self-actualization. That we all know the idea of food, clothing, and shelter, right? We have to have those basic needs met, and if we don't have those basic needs met, we can't meet higher needs. Maslow's pyramid always described it as you have your subsistence needs at the base of the pyramid, then it comes to security and safety, then it goes to belonging and esteem, and eventually this idea of self-actualization. And a lot of my clients, subjectively, I would look at it and say, this guy's living a self-actualized life, this person is. But the reality is they had this inner doubt, this inner knowing that all of that could be taken away in an instant by someone who, wants to do them harm. And they were seeking training and knowledge so that they could take full responsibility for their own personal security and that of their families, and not have to outsource it, not have to really rely on technology or other people to keep them safe, whether it's the law enforcement community or private security or whatnot. So I found this to be a common theme. And I saw it over and over and over and over again over 2 decades working with some of the, high profile folks that I work with. And I've decided, this knowledge needs to get out there, because the information that's in this book is a different way of thinking and a different way of navigating the world that really doesn't exist outside of a very, very small elite group, if you will, of sort of people who are well trained in the close protection industry, or who think in this way, or have specialized training in threat assessment, things like that. And I wanted to make it very achievable and observable for the average person to grasp, and to be able to have a handbook to fall back on and say, I remember reading about that. Where do I open up to talk about how do I identify and deal with sociopaths? How do I deal with workplace violence? How do I deal with travel security? All of those things embedded in there with congruent themes throughout.
So, Mr. Sam, how does the book define living ready in the modern world?
How does it define that? Um,
Yes.
I think that at the end of the day, Daniel, we all recognize that the only thing in life that is certain is uncertainty, right? We all
Yes.
know on some level. And no matter how much we try to exert control over factors around us, whether that's living in a good neighborhood, putting technological security measures in place, ultimately, what it really comes down to is what is inside of you and your capacity, if you will, to respond, your capacity to be able to adapt and overcome difficult situations. So, what the book really defines as, in my opinion, is giving people access to formally hidden or sort of very little known tactics and processes for being able to engage in life, deal with other people, and to do so on their own terms. And by conquering that second layer of the Maslow pyramid, by saying, okay, I know I can protect myself. You don't have to be a ninja, but you have these skill sets now that you're no longer dependent on others. You're more independent. You have this self reliance that you can go and do whatever you want. You can travel, you can get on stage, you can do things and take risks with a higher degree of confidence, because you have this inner knowing that you have the capacity to adapt and overcome challenges.
Very well said. Mr. Sam,
Thank you.
very well said. So, what makes Live Ready different from other personal safety or preparedness guides?
So I don't think there's another book really on the market that has the information that this book has. I've read many of them. I would like to say most of what is out there. I'm a big reader. You can see behind me, I've got a library I'm sitting in. There are books that have addressed certain topics. Um, I'll give you an example of, I think of the iconic classic It's called The Gift of Fear. Okay. And The Gift of Fear is one of those wild bestsellers, the international bestsellers, but it addresses only one aspect of personal preparedness and personal security. And what The Gift of Fear is it basically can summarize as trust your intuition, right? If you find yourself intuitively in danger, run away, get away from it. And there's a lot of survival skills, and there's an incredible bank of information in that book. But it really, that book was a pivot point in my career many, many years ago, a couple decades, maybe 25 years ago when I first read it. Forgive my sniffles. I thought it was an exceptional book, and I wanted to do something that would be the next level of that. And I wanted to answer the questions that were not answered. What do you do if you can't run away? How do you select the right training? What are the differences between, being able to recognize danger on an intuitive level and being able to spot the actual indicators and articulate the indicators? If you spot someone who's dangerous and you're trying to define to law enforcement or to your employer, this is why I'm uncomfortable in this situation. How do you actually navigate the information flow of that? What are you looking for? In some ways, just on the situational awareness, for example, a lot of people say things like, well, I pay attention. I'm aware. The problem is that paying attention is just the prerequisite. You have to know what to look for, how to look, and when to look so you don't burn yourself out. And that is a process. That is a trained behavioral process that you have to understand the information first and then systematically adopt it. And it's easy to do. It's very easy. It's natural. But the concept is that you have to lay it out for people so they know specifically what to look for and how to look. On top of that, we get into the idea of there is no substitution for physical training when it comes to the physical aspects of self defense. So this book was not meant to be a handbook. Most of the book, not in the physical sense. Forgive me.
So, Mr. Sam, what
Yeah.
practical strategies does the book suggest for personal safety?
Well, I'll give you a few. Let me just finish that first question though, that you
Yes,
asked me
go
of how
ahead.
does it differ.
Yeah, go ahead.
Most of this the handbooks on personal security that exist, Daniel, are
Yes.
physical in nature. They've got images, they're showing you pictures, they're technical guides of here's how you poke someone's eye or whatever it is. No one was addressing the soft skills. And that's what I wanted to do, is give the software. Now, technical, I'll give you an example. The book interweaves two interrelated concepts, Daniel. One is what I call the myth of helplessness, and the other is what I call the myth of randomness. The myth of helplessness, in a simple way, is that we are conditioned in many ways to believe that we are helpless in the face of certain kinds of violence, that we have to leave it to the professionals or call someone else to help. But the reality is, we are the ones who are going to be there when the trouble arises. So we have to have those skills and we need to overcome that. But in terms of actual takeaway from a podcast, the myth of randomness is an interesting one. See, when we call violence random, what we are saying is we are saying that if violence is random, it is therefore unpredictable. And if something is unpredictable, then what possible responsibility do we have towards controlling it or managing it or responding to it? It's like a lightning strike. But violence is not random. It is a process, and it's a process as observable and predictable as boiling water if you know what the warning signs are to look for. So the concept is, in a very simplistic way, let's take, for example, how bad guys operate in general. Now, I define in the book different kinds of bad guys and what they're looking for, what their objectives are, and it's easy to spot them. But the basic idea here is they all follow a very simple, predictable pattern I call the timeline of violence. TIME is an acronym. It stands for target selection, interview, or intelligence gathering, method of attack, and then escape, exploitation. So here's a simple idea. Take 9/11 or any terrorist attack that we can look at, but 9/11 is a good example we're all familiar with. So imagine before the attack, one of the bad guys says to the group, I got a great idea, guys. Let's fly a plane into the World Trade Center. Let's target the World Trade Center. All right. The World Trade Center is the target now. Okay. That's at the T. Someone says, I got an idea. Let's fly a plane into the building. So now we have a proposed method of attack. Well, the reason why they don't just go for it, they don't go jumping from the T to the M in this equation, is because they haven't vetted their plan, and there's an inherently high degree of potential for failure because they haven't done their diligence, right? So they enter into what is called the eye of time. At the eye of time is where all of the pre-operational planning is taking place, where all of this, the training and the rehearsals and the surveillance, everything that's operational to get confirmation that this is the right target and the right method of attack. Once they're satisfied, that M of time turns into the moment of commitment. What we mean by that is that's the moment of the attack, the moment of bang, if you will. Now, if they win, there's maybe an escape plan or an exploitation plan. But the idea here is we're not too worried about the back end of the equation. What we're worried about here is how do we get ahead of the curve? And if you ask yourself a couple questions, you say, well, we don't want to be on the M of time. We don't want to be responding to a violent act that's already in progress, that is launched. What we want to do is get ahead of that. We want to be left of bang in this equation. Okay. So, can we avoid being targeted? What do you think, Daniel? Can you avoid being targeted in general? Can you?
No.
You can't. And it's because the bad guy controls that, right? So, even though we may be really exercising good behaviors, all the standard stuff, we don't go down the dark alleys, we don't put ourselves in danger, challenging situations. The problem is because the bad guy chooses who they're going to target, sometimes we can be targeted even though we've done everything right. So our time to be able to get ahead of this curve and the opportunity to really exert influence is at the eye of time. So being able to recognize the warning signs of the eye of time is critical. If we take that extreme example of a terrorist attack and we ask ourselves another question, we say, do street criminals do the same thing? What do you think? Do they do the same target selection, interviewing, intelligence gathering, method of attack, and then escape? Same process, right? It just
Yes.
happens in a very small time frame, right? So where 9/11, the eye of time lasted 5 full years, in a street attack or a mugging or a carjacking, it may only take moments, but we still have an eye of time. Because for the bad guy who's choosing you as a target for a mugging or whatever, they have a method of attack in mind. The concept is there's still risk. So for them to launch that attack, they have to have a certain degree of certainty that you will be a good, easy target, okay, that they'll be able to pull it off. So intercepting the process at the eye of time is a function of knowing when you're being what we call interviewed. And interview management skills come in first and foremost by recognizing when you're being interviewed. So, an easy way to, as a good takeaway to understand this, is at the moment someone approaches you and says, hey, man, can I talk to you for a sec on the street? Or the moment you're having an interaction with someone and he's very charming and very persuasive, say, for example, very commonly for women, and you're saying no, thank you, but he continues to persist. The concept here is to recognize that you are now being interviewed, right? And how you navigate that interview will determine very often whether or not this situation could escalate hours, days, weeks, minutes from now. Okay. So knowing that you have this dynamic in place, that you can actually forestall violence just by recognizing the interview dynamics is critical. And as an example that's very common, as a takeaway for our female listeners, and really for anyone, it's not about gender. What it is more so just statistically me referring to how predatory bad guys will tend to target women more in this way, is they're far more likely to be engaged with by what we would call a persuasion predator, not someone who jumps out of the bushes with a ski mask. So how do you recognize the signs of a persuasion predator in the interview dynamic? Well, it comes down to one primary thing. Charm. Most people think, oh, he's so charming. Daniel's so charming, right? But the reality is, we have to retrain our thinking to ask ourselves a question. And that question is, why is this person trying to charm me? All right. That's the difference. Now, the second component to that is when you say no, thank you, or no, or you try to establish a boundary and someone overrides that boundary and continues to persist. Come on, what's a big deal? What are you afraid of? Whatever those tactics are, all of it amounts to one thing. They're not interested in what you want, only what they want. And the principle here is to recognize that early enough to say, okay, this is no longer fun and games. This is someone who is actually trying to manipulate me and doing it in a fairly sophisticated way. I've always said, as a lot of people have as well, if bad guys, particularly persuasion oriented predators, sociopaths, etc., if they turn their powers to good, they'd be some of the best salespeople and psychologists out there because they really understand human beings and how to manipulate and maneuver people. What we need to get good at is recognizing those signs early and on that we can defend ourselves. And I would suggest that any kid going to college should be reading this book. All right. Anyone starting off their life should be reading this book. Adults, certainly, but a lot of adults have a bank of knowledge. To me, if you think you're good, get the book for your kids because they don't know this information. And in today's digital age, it's even harder for them to grasp.
So, Mr. Sam, what will be your advice for those people out there who want to live ready anytime, anywhere?
My advice is start with the book. This is the basis. And then seek me out on my website, liveready.co. We have a newsletter. I publish lots of insightful articles. I have an online training program that is available that will navigate you through the physical aspects of personal security, not just in terms of teaching you skill sets that you can learn actually online, but also in helping you, define if you're in Vancouver, where do you go for training, right? If you're in, Boise, Idaho, where can you go to find good training? How do you discern the good from the bad of what is going to work for you? So the combination of the book and my online training or a live seminar are the ways to go. And that's how we get people from where they are now to truly being able to live ready.
So, Mr. Sam, what will be your short term and long term goals in writing?
Well, short term goals, I continue to write articles that expand upon the themes of Live Ready. Some of those have to do with current events, things like the United Healthcare CEO's murder, things like that, that I think are very relevant to understand tactically. Okay. And from a long term standpoint, I know there's another book here that I'm working on mentally. And I haven't started putting pen to paper yet, but that book will be more specifically on mindset. And it will go beyond the tactics and the strategies in this book. And it's going to be talking about how to truly develop more of a bulletproof mind. And, that's something that I want to conquer and want to look at. I don't have a working title for it, but that's the long term goal, at least the intermediate term goal, Daniel.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Sam, and looking forward for more empowering books like this. So to wrap up our discussion for today, what daily habits can help someone maintain a state of readiness?
Put down your phone, pay attention to your environment. When you're looking at things, look from left to right. It's how we read, it's how our brain processes information. If you see someone who's out of place, take a little deeper dive. You don't have to stare at them, but ask yourself why, what's going on. If you see someone who's not using an environment for its designated purpose, pay attention to that. Just when you can watch for the watchers like that takes you off the menu, and then be aware of those interviews. If someone approaches you, someone's following you, if it's a persuasion dynamic, let your radar go up.
Mr. Sam Rosenberg, again, thank you so much for sharing your empowering books to the world. And as I said, looking forward for more empowering books like this. So, Mr. Sam, can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Yeah. Follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X. It's all Live Ready CO. And go to my website, join my mailing list, liveready.co. And you can find the book on Amazon and just about anywhere books are sold online.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Sam Rosenberg because, as I said, if you support him, more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Sam, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone.
More to come, people. See you soon.
Thank you, Daniel.
You're most welcome, Mr. Sam. And you are again invited. If you have book to promote, just book to my booking calendar and let's talk about your books.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, Daniel.
You are most welcome.
All
And this
right.
podcast is created for you.
Thank you.